Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. When Amanda comes back, Billy tells Jack about Kane's scheme. While Billy Abbott tells Jack Abbott about Kane Ashby's scheme, Amanda Sinclair will return for new orders. By revealing her promotion, Nikki Newman will attempt to cheer up Claire Newman. Other changes may occur at Chancellor as well, but nothing will really take Claire's relationship problems off her mind. The fact that Kyle Abbott betrayed her trust will continue to worry Claire. Kyle should have told Audra Charles that he had kissed her in France sooner, but it's too late. Kyle's only option at this point is to try to establish that Claire is the only woman he desires. For this reason, Kyle plans to purchase an engagement ring and propose to Claire shortly. Kane may assign Amanda Sinclair to deal with his blackmail predicament in the interim, as she will return and receive some new orders. Kane might rely on Amanda to find a way out of this predicament if there is one. Naturally, it's also feasible that once Amanda returns to the scene, Phyllis Summers will ask for her assistance. Amanda might be urged by Phyllis to persuade Kane to abandon all of his takeover schemes. Billy, for his part, doesn't think Kane is actually giving in. Billy fears that Kane still intends to stir trouble and is only using him as a diversion for the Newmans. Billy will, however, confide in Jack Abbott about Kane allegedly concluding that he has had enough of his fantasies about dominating Genoa City. Jack would argue that they need to be ready for everything and be just as dubious as Billy about the news, which now includes Kane in addition to Victor, Jack, and Billy. According to some, these guys are making decisions and preventing women from achieving success. Are you doomed to fail? In Genoa City, there aren't many successful women. Phyllis is struggling to land a billion-dollar company, while Audra lost Vibrante. Will women always fail? On a discussion board for a soap opera, the original poster made a joke about Audra and Phyllis joining a support group. Phyllis and Audra could do stand-up together, someone said in response. But another admirer thought of something else. They think women aren't striking out on their own because the men's club is in charge. The city of Genoa is a man's paradise. Unless one of the guys on the show is giving the honors as a gift, they will never allow women to win. Audra and Phyllis are both competent and shouldn't be used as a prop to support Victor's ongoing ascent. A valid argument was made by this poster. Women are only effective when they are actively connected with and cooperating with their partners. Billy and Sally, as well as Nikki and Victor, demonstrate that. Chelsea had previously worked at Mochetti, just like Sally. Adam quickly snatched her up and got her a job at Newman Media. These women are gifted and intelligent. As they battle each other, the men can start their own businesses. But one of the few successful women who managed to establish herself in a world dominated by men is Lily. When Amanda Sinclair finally made her long-awaited return to Genoa City, the timing couldn't have been more precarious, because Billy Abbott had just sat down with his brother Jack Abbott to deliver a stern warning about Kane Ashby's latest scheme, and although Billy had spent years making reckless moves and underestimating rivals, this time his instincts told him that Kane's maneuvering wasn't merely about business ambition but about shifting the entire balance of power in town. As Billy paced Jack's office at Jabot, his agitation was palpable, because he feared Kane was setting everyone up, playing a longer game that made his prior attempts at corporate leverage look almost childish. And while Jack tried to maintain his usual calm elder brother demeanor, even he couldn't hide the concern in his voice when he suggested that if Kane was indeed reactivating dormant alliances or pulling Amanda Sinclair back into the fold with new orders, then they needed to prepare for counterattacks. On multiple fronts, because Amanda, brilliant and precise as she was in the courtroom, had the uncanny ability to twist a situation to Kane's advantage while making it seem like she was merely following professional obligations. At the same time, Nikki Newman, sensing the turbulence rising around her family and particularly her granddaughter Claire Newman, attempted to buoy Claire's spirits by announcing her own recent promotion, hoping that a distraction rooted in Newman pride and power might steady Claire's nerves. But Claire's heartbreak over Kyle Abbott's betrayal remained at the forefront of her mind, gnawing at her with each passing day, because Kyle had kissed Audra Charles in France and had chosen silence instead of honesty. And for Claire, trust once broken was not easily repaired. Though Kyle insisted he wanted only her and was desperate to prove it by shopping for an engagement ring and planning a proposal, his timing seemed almost tragically misguided, because every time Claire replayed the memory of him with Audra, She wondered if love could be rekindled on the ashes of secrecy. And meanwhile Kane, operating from the shadows, recognized that Amanda's sharp intellect could help extricate him from his newest blackmail predicament, perhaps giving him a path to neutralize those threatening him. But Kane also knew that Amanda's loyalties could shift depending on who appealed to her conscience. And with Phyllis Summers lurking in the background, Phyllis, who despised Kane's ruthless pursuit of control over Genoa City's power structures, it was inevitable that Amanda would be pulled in multiple directions, asked to serve two masters, with Kane pushing her to secure his escape and Phyllis urging her to talk Kane out of his takeover schemes altogether. Phyllis, never one to sit idly by, believed she could weaponize Amanda's moral compass, while Kane, shrewder than his detractors gave him credit for, recognized Amanda might represent his last lifeline, so he tightened his grip and promised her influence, prestige, and the chance to reshape Chancellor if she sided with him. And as these deals were whispered behind closed doors, Billy remained unconvinced by any assurances that Kane was stepping back, telling Jack flatly that he didn't buy the story about Kane having had enough of his fantasies of running the city, because in Billy's mind, Kane was the kind of man who would feign surrender just to lull adversaries into complacency. Jack agreed, noting that history had proven time and again that Kane's exits were never final, his defeats always temporary, so the brothers resolved to keep their guard up and prepare defensive strategies for Jabot and the family's reputation, realizing that if Kane reignited his ambitions, they would be forced to battle him not only in the boardroom but in the court of public opinion. Still, what unsettled Billy most was not only Kane's maneuvering but the broader truth it highlighted about Genoa City, the entrenched men's club atmosphere where Victor Newman, Jack Abbott, Billy Abbott, and now even Kane positioned themselves as gatekeepers of success, deciding who could thrive and who would fail, often leaving the women around them scrambling for scraps or forced to tie their fates to male counterparts, a bitter irony given the extraordinary intelligence and talent of women like Phyllis Summers, Audra Charles, Amanda Sinclair, Sally Spectra, Chelsea Lawson, and Lily Winters, each of whom had proven capable in business but repeatedly found their opportunities limited or sabotaged unless a man was backing them. This dynamic became the subject of heated online chatter among soap fans, some joking that Phyllis and Audra should start a support group after their latest defeats, others suggesting they could turn their misfortunes into a comedy act, while sharper critics argued the real issue was systemic, that Genoa City was portrayed as a man's paradise where women were never allowed to sustain independent victories, and where power was only bestowed upon them as gifts from men like Victor, Adam, or Jack, but rarely seized outright. Indeed, while Billy and Sally's brief partnership or Nikki and Victor's long marriage showcased women thriving in tandem with male allies, independent pursuits by women were more often doomed, as seen when Audra lost Vibrante or when Phyllis's billion-dollar ambitions kept crashing against brick walls. Yet despite these defeats, the resilience of Genoa City's women remained undeniable, with Lily Winters standing as one of the few who had managed to carve a space for herself in this patriarchal world, a testament to perseverance and strategic alliances. As all these currents collided, the personal heartbreak of Claire, Kyle's desperate proposal plans, Amanda's strategic return, Kane's blackmail schemes, Billy's warnings to Jack, Nikki's attempt at cheer, Phyllis's manipulative efforts, and the broader cultural debate about whether women were doomed to fail in this city, it became clear that Genoa City was heading toward another storm of betrayals, alliances, and revelations, where every choice mattered and where the battle lines weren't only drawn in corporate offices or family dining rooms but also in the fragile hearts of those trying to love and survive in a city where schemes never sleep and trust is the most precious, and most easily broken, currency of all. But even as these threads unraveled across Genoa City, the ripple effects of Amanda Sinclair's return grew larger than anyone anticipated, because Amanda wasn't just walking back into the city with a suitcase and an open calendar. She was stepping into a battlefield where Kane Ashby's manipulations, Billy Abbott's suspicions, and Jack Abbott's protective instincts clashed like thunder in a summer storm, and Amanda, ever the tactician, immediately sensed that she held more influence than she'd expected, since both sides wanted her, one for her sharpness in crisis management and the other for her ability to temper a rogue like Kane. And though Amanda prided herself on professional integrity, her personal history with these players, her complicated ties to Billy, her brushes with Nate Hastings, her grudging respect for Lily Winters, meant she couldn't separate her legal acumen from her emotional memories. So when Kane outlined the precarious position he found himself in, hinting at threats he couldn't quite control, Amanda listened carefully, her mind racing through statutes, precedents, and negotiation tactics, but she also measured the man before her, gauging whether his plea for help was rooted in desperation or manipulation. And while her instincts whispered that Kane was twisting the narrative to cast himself as victim, Amanda didn't immediately turn him away, because she knew that power often resided in proximity, and proximity to Kane's schemes could mean leverage for herself down the road. Meanwhile, Phyllis Summers made her own approach, cornering Amanda at crimson lights in her usual fiery, restless way, practically hissing that Kane was a snake who needed to be defanged before he slithered into positions of control. And though Amanda tried to maintain neutrality, Phyllis pressed harder, reminding her of how often men like Kane, Victor, and Jack dictated the fates of women in this town, pointing to the failed ventures, the dashed dreams, the way talent like Audra Charles' had been squandered once she was cut off from her patrons, and Amanda, though weary of Phyllis's dramatics, couldn't entirely dismiss her argument, because everywhere she looked the evidence was there. Phyllis herself fighting tooth and nail for independence, Sally bouncing between Adam and Nick to secure relevance, Chelsea enduring collapses and reinventions, Audra clawing at opportunities only to watch them crumble, and even Nikki, despite her grace and social power, forever tied to Victor's empire. Amanda knew that aligning with Kane might feed into that cycle, but walking away left her vulnerable to being sidelined altogether, and so she faced the same impossible dilemma that so many women in Genoa City had encountered: to cooperate with a man's scheme or risk irrelevance in the corridors of power. And while Amanda weighed her options, Billy Abbott vented to Jack again, hammering home his fear that Kane was simply using Amanda as a pawn to buy legitimacy, to make himself appear calculated instead of reckless. And Jack, though pragmatic, privately agreed, telling Billy that Amanda's involvement was less a sign of Kane's surrender and more an indication that Kane was gearing up for a prolonged campaign, because men like Kane never brought in reinforcements unless they were serious about a fight. And this realization left the Abbott brothers uneasy, as though the ground beneath them was already shifting. Yet far from the corporate trenches, Claire Newman sat alone, replaying Kyle's promises against the memory of his betrayal, struggling to reconcile the man who looked at her with pleading devotion and the man who had shared a kiss with Audra Charles in France. And though Nikki's promotion announcement was meant to lift her mood, Claire found herself fixating on the symbolism. How promotions, proposals, and power plays seemed to define love and loyalty in this city. How men always thought they could fix emotional wounds with jewelry or status, when what she craved was honesty and steadiness, not a ring bought out of guilt. And though Kyle's intention was earnest, Claire questioned whether his desperation to prove his devotion was about her or about easing his own conscience. Audra, on the other hand, reveled in the chaos her mere existence had triggered. Though she herself was grappling with the sting of failure, her company Vibrante having collapsed despite her shrewdness, leaving her once again painted as reckless rather than visionary. And as she watched Kyle scramble to salvage his relationship with Claire, she couldn't help but smirk at how quickly loyalty faltered when tested by temptation, because in her mind, Claire's heartbreak proved that Kyle's devotion was as flimsy as the paper contracts the men of Genoa City used to keep women in line. Back at Chancellor, subtle shifts were underway too, with employees sensing that leadership changes were on the horizon, whispers about Kane's possible takeover, fueling uncertainty, while Lily Winters fought to maintain stability, her years of steady work earning her respect but not immunity from the tremors of men's games. And Lily, who had once believed in building bridges, now found herself privately admitting that Phyllis and Amanda might be right. That unless women carved out their own networks and refused to play by the rules written by men, they would always be scrambling to protect what little ground they'd gained. Yet even in this grim reality, there were sparks of resilience. Lily remembered every time she'd been underestimated and still emerged stronger, every time someone dismissed her leadership only to watch her prove them wrong. And she wondered whether Amanda might follow that path too, choosing not to be Kane's pawn but her own queen. But Kane, cunning and persuasive, continued to whisper promises of influence into Amanda's ear, painting pictures of a Chancellor dynasty reshaped by her brilliance. And Amanda, exhausted yet intrigued, began drafting hypothetical strategies in her mind, imagining how she could turn his predicament into her opportunity, even as doubts gnawed at her. And so the city simmered, with every character carrying secrets, regrets, and ambitions. the threads intertwining into a tapestry where trust was scarce, betrayal was common, and victory, especially for women, remained fleeting, dependent on whether they chose to fight on their own terms or accept the confines of the men's club that still dictated the rhythm of Genoa City's relentless game of power and passion. As the days stretched on, Amanda Sinclair's return continued to ripple through Genoa City in ways that no one fully anticipated. For while Kane Ashby positioned her as his trusted advisor in his bid to maneuver out of a dangerous blackmail scheme, Amanda herself began to feel the invisible tug-of-war pulling her between Kane's promises of power and Phyllis Summers's relentless warnings about what aligning with him would mean. And though Amanda prided herself on her independence and her ability to analyze situations without being swayed by emotion, the truth was that Genoa City had a way of forcing everyone into the same tangled web of loyalties, betrayals, and compromises, making even the most rational decisions fraught with personal consequences. Phyllis, never one to quietly surrender when she smelled danger, cornered Amanda again and painted a vivid picture of what would happen if Kane gained the upper hand, that Chancellor would fall into chaos, that women like Lily Winters would be sidelined, that the Newmans and Abbotts alike would be dragged into another round of vicious games. And Amanda, despite herself, found those words echoing late at night when she lay awake wondering whether her legal expertise would end up cementing Kane's grip on the city instead of loosening it. Meanwhile, Billy Abbott remained restless, pacing Jack's office and muttering about how Kane always resurfaced when everyone least wanted him to. And Jack, though outwardly composed, agreed in private that Amanda's reappearance was no coincidence, that it was Kane's way of signaling that he wasn't finished, not by a long shot. And so the Abbott brothers renewed their pact to remain vigilant, to shield their families and businesses from whatever storm Kane might unleash next. Across town, Nikki Newman tried once more to cheer Claire with light-hearted talk about her promotion, but Claire, her eyes still clouded with pain, could only half listen, because Kyle Abbott's betrayal haunted her like a song she couldn't stop hearing, the memory of him with Audra Charles repeating in her mind whenever she tried to picture a future with him. And though Kyle had gone as far as visiting jewelers to pick out the perfect engagement ring, his urgency only deepened her suspicions that he was trying to fix a wound with a grand gesture instead of confronting the root problem, his inability to be fully honest with her. Kyle, however, told himself that the proposal wasn't about guilt but about love, that if he could just put a ring on Claire's finger, she would finally see that she was the only woman he wanted. But even as he rehearsed his words, there was a flicker of doubt in his chest, because he knew that trust once broken was not easily restored, and Claire, though tender-hearted, wasn't naive. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, Audra Charles walked through society with her chin lifted high, telling herself that though Vibrante had collapsed, she wasn't finished, that somehow she would claw her way back into relevance, and watching Kyle scramble to salvage Claire's affection almost amused her, because in her view, his desperation proved how fragile men's loyalties really were, how easily they crumbled under temptation, and though she wasn't actively trying to reclaim Kyle, she knew the shadow of their kiss would linger between him and Claire like a ghost, undermining them no matter how much Kyle swore his devotion. At Chancellor, the whispers of Kane's possible return to prominence grew louder, employees wondering whether their roles would be safe if the company shifted hands again, while Lily Winters, steady and determined, fought to keep morale high, reminding everyone of her own history of resilience, her ability to weather storms that would have broken weaker people. But even Lily couldn't ignore the truth, that the men of Genoa City always seemed to dictate the terms of the game, and that unless women like her, Amanda, Phyllis, and Audra found a way to work together instead of against one another, they would remain pawns in an endless chess match where kings protected themselves while queens were sacrificed. Amanda, caught in the middle of this shifting landscape, realized more and more each day that her decision, whether to stand with Kane or resist him, would shape not just her own trajectory but potentially the balance of power in the entire city. And though she hadn't made up her mind yet, she began drafting strategies for both outcomes, carefully plotting escape routes in case Kane's schemes collapsed around her, because in Genoa City, collapse was never a matter of if but when, and survival required preparation. In this way, the city itself seemed to pulse with tension, every conversation layered with subtext, every glance hiding unspoken fears, as if everyone knew instinctively that another storm was brewing, one that would test loyalties, shatter fragile truces, and remind every soul that in Genoa City, the only constant was betrayal cloaked as love and ambition disguised as loyalty. And yet, even as Amanda weighed her choices in silence, the ripple of her return stirred deeper anxieties across Genoa City, because for Jack Abbott, the possibility that Kane Ashby might once again destabilize not just Chancellor but the fragile balance between the Abbotts and Newmans was a scenario too dangerous to ignore. And while Jack had faced rivals before, the thought of Kane armed with Amanda's legal precision left him uneasy in a way he hadn't felt in years, while Billy Abbott, more hot-headed, declared that he wouldn't sit back and watch Kane manipulate the city into chaos, though Jack cautioned that charging ahead without proof or strategy would only give Kane the advantage. Meanwhile, Phyllis Summers refused to stay quiet, stirring her own pot by gossiping loudly about Kane's supposed schemes and Amanda's involvement, ensuring the whispers spread like wildfire through society and Crimson Lights until half the city was buzzing about what Kane might be plotting. And Kane, hearing the rumors swirl, smirked in private, knowing that every time people speculated about his next move, it gave him power, because uncertainty was the greatest weapon he had. Across town, Claire Newman found herself at a crossroads of the heart.